Welcome to the Sage Family Podcast,
where we explore natural, homeschooling, gentle parenting,
simple living, and family adventure.
I'm Rachel Rainbolt, the Sage Parenting Coach, coming to you from the Pacific Northwest, where I live wild and free in connection with my 3 wildlings and the Papa Bear in our fixer-upper on the beach. This is episode 13, and today I'm here with my friend Becca Shern talking about values. Bex is a mom, partner, registered dietitian, and creator of minimalwellness.com. If you've ever felt like you could use some clarity in setting your compass, this is the episode for you. So join us around the campfire and let's get living the family life of our dreams. If you are loving the Sage Family Podcast, then become a part of it through Patreon, where you can support these important conversations, help make this show great, and get rewards doing it. This week's adventure was actually supposed to be Cedar River Watershed, but we were driving past Rattlesnake Lake and we just had to pull off and jump out. And before I could even get my bearings, the kids were in the water. So I texted our friends to let them know, and we all managed to meet up at the lake, which was just breathtakingly beautiful. The water was clear and surrounded by evergreen mountains. There was this huge tree in the water that the kids were just having the best time swimming to and climbing all over. It was incredible, and we vowed to return again soon. After a long time at the lake, we decided to continue on to the Watershed's Education Center, where we learned the full story of Rattlesnake Lake, which was fascinating. It got its name because of a crop that the indigenous people grew that made a rattling sound in the breeze. And the town that actually existed where the lake is today was flooded when the city of Seattle dammed the river to collect more water. So historical artifacts often wash up on the shore. I took so many photos and videos of this adventure, and you can see them all over on Instagram by following along with Sage Parenting. Today, my friend Becca is joining me to talk about values. We connected a while back on Instagram, me soaking in all her posts about minimalism and wellness, and her soaking in all my posts about parenting and unschooling, and we've been DMing ever since. What might be my favorite thing about Bex, aside from her refreshing down-to-earth nature and open-minded curiosity, is the level of thoughtfulness and clarity around her values, and in turn her priorities, and in turn her life choices. So I help people set their compasses through the lens of parenting, and I would say she helps people set their compasses through the lens of health and wellness. So tell us your story, Bex. Who are you? What are you passionate about? What about your relationships and life fulfill you? And what is your relationship with this topic of values? Which, for the record, is my version of the question, what do you do?
I love it. Rachel, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to have this conversation. And gosh, what a humbling introduction. I guess, a little bit about me. I'm a mom now, as of 5 years ago. I'm a partner. I'm a registered dietitian. As you said, I kind of see the world through a lens of health and wellness. And, as a mid-30-something person, I feel really fortunate to more or less have had that lens like the vast majority of my life.
Nice.
Yeah. But there was, this time in my 20s when that kind of faded from view a little bit. Mm-hmm. And that created this situation where I really had to make some hard decisions. So, I grew into my 20s, as a registered dietitian. I went through school, as a teenager and a young adult. I became a registered dietitian. I got my first job. And I was living a life that was very much in line with my values and was driven by, health and wellness and contribution to other people, especially again through the lens of health and wellness. And I felt awesome about that, right? And so I'm going into my mid-20s and landed a great job, and I happened to meet this man who would then become my husband and now ex-husband, and, and the father of my child. And the nutshell version is through the course of our relationship, I kind of became a shell of my ideal self. I didn't lose touch with health and wellness completely because in large part it was my vocation. So I could go to work and have that value somewhat fulfilled. But I wasn't able to do the sort of deep diving into it in my personal life that I wanted to. And a lot of my other, foundational values really suffered during this time, and we can come back to that. But the gist of it is, during my late 20s and as I became a mother, I really realized that I wasn't who I wanted to be.
Yeah, like good enough is not good enough.
No, yeah, and I even felt like it wasn't even good enough. It was like my daughter, her name is Ella, she's 5, and she was a very challenging infant. I wish I had known you 5 years ago, because life might have been very different, although I love my life now. But I might
still
have
would
had
have been on the
time.
other end of those DMs in the middle of the night. I totally could have helped you.
Man. Oh, it was a really hard time. And, she was a very colicky infant, and I was a primary breadwinner by a long shot. So I was a professional mom. I was going through trying to finish up my master's in public health, and I just was losing my grip on reality, sort of. And then about 4 years ago, I finally was like, I can't do this, right? Like I can't continue on this trajectory. Right. And so long after several long months, almost a year of trying to really work on things with my former spouse, trying to get better at being a mother, I kind of realized that the marriage thing wasn't going to work. And so my marriage ended, and during that process, I really focused on figuring out who I really wanted to be and who I formerly was. Yeah. And sort of coming back into like reacquainting myself with who I felt like I used to be, and also who I wanted to be in the future. Because who I used to be was not a mom, right? Like, so right. I had to add that new component into my identity.
I sometimes talk about that entry, or the transition into the season of motherhood, as like if your life is a puzzle, when you become a mom, all of those puzzle pieces get shaken up and thrown on the floor. And then you get you get the invitation and the privilege and the really hard work of piecing yourself back together anew and deciding with intention which pieces to keep and which pieces need work and which you want to set by the wayside.
That's a beautiful analogy. And unfortunately, I didn't enter marriage with the intention of having it end, but the marriage was the piece that had to be put to the side. Yeah. I didn't have the capacity to maintain that relationship while being the mother that I wanted to be and that Ella deserves. Yeah. So that was kind of Ella was the catalyst, ironically, for my marriage.
Thank you, Ella. Well, and I can relate too. I gave birth to my first 2 weeks into grad school. So it sounds like our entries into motherhood had some similarities in that sense.
Yeah, kind of trial by fire. Yeah. And so for the last, 4 years, I've really just been, taking some large steps, obviously, and some small steps to just realign my life and to live a more intentional, value-driven life.
Oh, I
And,
love that.
now it is, I ended up leaving my former employment and starting, my sort of entrepreneurial side of things with my job now, my business now. And that was 2 years ago. So, I've just kind of continued to make these steps that just feel in better alignment.
Yeah, it's like one choice point at a time, stepping into the
Yeah.
person you want to be and into the life that you want to have, and using your values as that compass of which direction to step and where to lean has been key for me, and it sounds like it has been for you too.
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, most of us start out with like inherited values because, I mean, you have values. If you haven't consciously written them for yourself and your family, then you are living off of inherited values, which are the values that you pick up from sources like your family of origin and the media. And if you clear away all the clutter and dig deep, you find these values that are underneath your choices. And this is one of the first steps in any sage parenting work that I often refer to as unpacking your baggage. And inherited values really can poison your life and your potential and your journey when they lie in conflict with the life you want to create and the relationships you want to enjoy and the person you want to be. So what inherited values have you experienced or seen undermine people's success?
Yeah, I think that is such a great way of saying it. I think that one part of this is thinking about both values and beliefs, because what I've noticed is that what I at least personally inherited more isn't so much a set of values that were problematic. It was some beliefs underneath those values that were problematic, right? And so for me, the belief that there's this narrow definition of success, that generally includes some combination of like education and an income and, and owning a home and like having some, material possessions that sort of signify like you're a productive member of society, right?
Absolutely.
And like, so for me, those can be values, and but I think, in my definitions anyways, they feel more like beliefs, right? That like the only way to be successful is to, follow this formula, this template. And so that ends up driving your values. And so some of the values I think that come from that sort of belief template that I struggled with were like an overemphasis on certainty, right? If you get this education, if you secure this level of income, if you purchase a home, if you if you become a parent, you'll be happy.
Yeah. The contract of the American dream.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, man, we as a society are really sold that. And I would think that it would change because it's pretty obvious, especially in the last 10 years as this discussion around like, the American dream's not working so well for people.
Yeah.
You'd think that it would start losing some of its traction and salience, but it doesn't seem to be doing that, or at least it didn't lose that salience quickly enough for me. I think that sort of combination of beliefs and values. So the significance also is a piece. So the need to feel significant, and often because of that belief structure of like our very narrow definitions of success and how you will get to happiness, significance often ends up coming from what do you do for a living? Where do you fall on the socioeconomic scale? Those sorts of
which is why I don't say, what do you do as my
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that those, it's a pretty big gnarly cluster of things.
Yeah.
But that seems to be the biggest challenge that I struggled with, that I've wrestled with, that I needed to unpack, and that I've seen a lot of other people struggle with. And that might be because of, the lens through which I do my work. It's through the lens of minimalism, which challenges those sets of beliefs specifically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the other big thing that, I struggled with in my 20s, especially, and that became really clear in my early 30s, and that other clients struggle with, is just not having clarity on your values and who you are and who you want to be.
Yes.
Just having that be super nebulous.
Yeah, well, when you
really
take on those inherited values, you feel like all the space is filled and someone plopped a compass in your hand, and so it's all taken care of. And the problem is that so many people spend years trudging down that path, only to hopefully at some point have some of those life experiences that lead them to start questioning all of those inherited values that they're carrying around.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because, like, some people the template does work for, it fits some people pretty well. And others it doesn't fit very well at all.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, and there's like that American dream piece that we talked about with consumerism. And, I know I was told, like, to get my high school diploma, I had to be accepted. I had to apply to 3 colleges, be accepted into one, or be accepted into some sort of trade program. And the path was so clear. Like, you go to college, you get hired at a career job, you work there until you retire, you buy a house, you have 2.5 children, whatever. And then I was a part of the generation where we graduated from college, got hired, and then the economy crashed. So
yep, 100%.
Yeah, all these companies, these huge companies, were going under. Entire corporations were just huge waves of people were being laid off. I have family members who had 4 houses, lost them all. Every house flipped upside down, and so I think a lot of people who are our age and younger are a little bit more had their eyes opened in sort of a forceful way that living according to other people's values, there's no guarantee that that's going to pay off and that that's going to lead to happiness. And then from a parenting perspective, so much of what families come to me with when they're saying, I'm really challenged, we're feeling stuck, I'm not sure what to do from here. That first step of unpacking the baggage is there because all of those inherited values are steering them wrong. Like obedience, like that value that children should be obedient. The developmental race, that value where it's valued that you do as many things as you can as young as you possibly can. All of those sort of inherited parenting values is just so valuable to become aware of all of them. And that's really the first step, and it's a huge step. You might feel like, I'm so freaking stressed out and frustrated because I can't get out the door on time each morning with my kid. And then after we dig a little deeper and start peeling back those layers, it always starts with an inherited value that doesn't align with the parent you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. That discontent is every time I've felt discontented since kind of coming to this realization, it might take me a day or two or even a week or two, but I always come back to what values are not being met.
Yes.
or what value have I carried through from childhood that isn't still one of my values, but it's still got some stickiness to it.
Yes, still got its hooks in.
Yeah.
Some parents, one of the first questions I ask is what qualities do you want to foster in your children long term, as adults? What qualities would you hope they would have? And it's always things like independence and free thinking and being confidently assertive and creative and all of these things. But then when you look at, okay, so in this parenting interaction right here about like putting on shoes, how can we approach that with the compass set toward those characteristics, with those values in mind? Because if right now you're trying to say, put on your shoes, I tell you to do it, and you do it, that's not fostering those qualities. And you foster those qualities one interaction at a time in the present moment.
Yeah. Yeah. What advice do you give people to like get their children out the door on time? I am fascinated about this one.
Well, first of all, we like zoom way out, which I know you can relate to, especially with as like a minimalist, and question everything about like their lifestyle. It's so funny because sometimes families will come to me with like, I can't get my kid to get their shoes on and get out the door in the morning. And then at the end of the month, they're like moving to a new state and they've changed jobs. Because it really is like those struggle points are often they're like an invitation to shine a light, a brighter light on the whole dynamic and the whole direction that you're moving in. So for example, if your kid is really struggling to get out the door on time every day, like there might be way too many transitions in your life. Like, do they have to get out the door really early, really rushed every single day? Like, what things can we change in their life and in your routine and in your rhythm to sort of shift all the expectations around the kid? Because if they're struggling in something, they're trying to tell you something that they don't have the words for, and it's obviously not about the damn shoes. Like there's there's something else bigger that's happening. If it's like a big recurring thing where those values and those expectations, they're off. And so let's shift all of those around what the kids' needs are today. And then, of course, after we do all that work, then you can like dial it in and you get more and more specific and really start focusing on the smaller things. With the shoes thing, one time I had a client who their kid just really struggled with fine motor skills and they needed less high pressure and stress opportunities to practice with that. And so they just got shoes that didn't have laces, and it solved the problem.
It's beautiful.
Right. Like the point is that they're thinking like, I need to tell them to put their shoes on and they need to do it. Like, what sort of consequences do we have to build in? And like, no, let's switch everything else around them and figure out what unmet need they're having and what unmet need you're having. Because it's often not about the kid at all. It's about you.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah. So most people are walking around living off of inherited values, but I want to empower all of our listeners to clarify their own. And your values will be your compass. They will inform all of your choices moving forward. So you really have to ask yourself, what do you most value? What is important in life? If you were on your deathbed, what would bring you comfort and what would bring you regret? Another question I find helpful with clients sometimes is, if a miracle occurred while you were sleeping and you awoke to find yourself living your ideal life, what would you see that would let you know this miracle occurred? What would you be doing? So what are some of your values and how have you gone about identifying them in different seasons of life?
Yeah. So I think of my values in 3 groups. I've got foundational values, which serve, as the name would imply, as a foundation for pretty much everything else in my life. Then I have the core values, which are kind of like the studs of a home. So you've got the foundation, which is the most critical piece. Then you've got the walls and
the framework.
Yep. And then minor values, which could be thought of as things that make that home feel like yours, or things that, maybe artwork or, decorations, or the style with which you make your home yours. Yeah. And so my foundational values are their health, relationships, growth, and passion or creativity. Sometimes they kind of ebb and flow between the two of them. Sometimes passion feels more appropriate. Sometimes creativity feels more appropriate, and contribution. And for me, the most important thing about this whole exercise of identifying your values is actually the definition step of values. So for me, like, yeah, sure, I've got these 5 foundational values, but like, what do those things actually mean to me? Um, and so that's the part that really changes within the different seasons of life is like, okay,
Yes.
so what does health look like for me right now? What do relationships, how do I nurture the relationships in my life? How do I contribute? You know, and that is the part that changes. It's not so much that my foundational values change. It's more what it means to me and which areas I need to focus on
Yeah, what it's going
during
to
that
look like in that
season.
season.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, like this last year, um, my partner and I, my partner's name is Joshua, we became like a bi-state household. So we have a small apartment in Missoula, Montana, and we have a small rental in Los Angeles, California. Um, that decision was driven by the combination of our values, my values and Josh's values, and the need for um, a new environment
Yeah.
and new opportunities and um, new just we've lived in Montana for a long time and we needed a new chapter, so to speak. And so over I've put a lot of time and energy into like the relationship part of that
Mm-hmm.
and um, establishing a home there and moving there being California. I'm in Montana right now. Um, and moving here in Montana to a smaller place and streamlining things and downsizing. And so I'm now coming into this season where I feel like that has reached a relatively good like maintenance place.
Mm.
And so now it's going to be kind of coming back to some of my other foundational values and also some core values, and we can talk about those in a couple minutes. But I think it's really important to be able to identify when the seasons change,
Yes.
and that's really different for everybody.
Well, that's perfect because I wanted to talk about collaboration because once
Yeah.
you're clear on your values as an individual, you have to get clear on your values as a couple if you're in a partnership, or as a family if you're in a family. Writing them down and talking them through is where you figure out how they fit together. A powerful setting for this conversation is in connection with your children because they're family values. So you want to, you're setting these family values. You want to invite your children in to witness this process and engage with their own thoughts and feelings. And that sets up a tremendous experience for connection and learning across the board for everyone. When everyone gets a seat at the table. So specifically, how did you and Josh and Ella collaborate in writing your family's value story?
Yeah, so Josh and I, about a year ago, sat down and did this independently. So, we had both done lots of thought around what our values are, but we'd never written them down for the purpose of sharing and collaborating as a partnership and as a family. So we both individually did the work, so established, our lists of foundational, core, and minor values, and then also imaginary values, right? Like, what are the things that get in the way
Yeah.
of real, other more important, the actual values? And so we did that, and we both wrestled with our lists for, I don't know, a week or two. Ella was 3.5, 4 at the time. So she felt a little young to sit and participate directly.
Let me see your list, Ella.
Right. So Josh and I sat and we collaborated and talked about both of our lists and our different definitions of what our values were. And then we kind of created a plan to better meet our individual needs as a couple.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like we don't have a written family value.
Right. Like there's not like a poster on my wall with that
No.
we've like no.
But we are real clear. In fact,
Yeah.
we have shared we're real nerdy. We have shared I notes like on our phones and our device. There are independent value lists. So like he sees when I update mine, and I see when he updates
I love that.
his, and yeah. So we kind of sporadically touch base on them, over the course of the year, and then once a year we have a plan to sit down and talk about them more deliberately and intentionally. And I actually think that this year is a good one to bring Ella into parts of it.
Yeah.
And just to talk about, hey, these are the things that are important to us as a family. And to just start the conversation of what is important to you.
Exactly.
And try to start teasing that out.
What is important to you?
As her mom.
And how do you, and of course, not in this language, but basically, how do you receive these values from us? So if like relationship is one of your values, then getting in collaboration with her about how she best feels that from you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and same with like experiences, like that's one of our values. So like experiences for me might look like one thing, but to actually sit down with my kids and say, okay, as a family we've decided that experiences are one of our values. Like how does that best work for you? What does that look like for you? And then how can we negotiate that among the 5 of us? Like if you have one introvert in your family and you have one extrovert in your family, it's like this collaboration on what each of those values will look like from one person to the next and how they can all live together peacefully.
Yeah. Ella's definitely, she's introverted, but she's a very high needs in terms of like feelings and connection. And I'm not. So I've had to learn her, throughout the course of her life so far, and adapt my parenting style accordingly. She just needs more closeness and connection.
High needs. That's the lingo for that in the parenting world. You have a high needs kid. Oh yes, my first was high needs, and they tend to be a little more intense, and they also tend to provide you with far more opportunity for growth.
That is a beautiful way of putting it. Yes. She truly is. When I was kind of at the low of, I don't know, the last decade or so in my life, it was when she was about a year old, right? A year and a half. And it was also the time that my marriage was ending. And I realized that the thing that I wanted most in the world was to be the best mother that I could possibly be for her. Yeah. And realizing that I will never be a perfect mother. Right. But that I had to do better in terms of growing and developing and becoming a bit more what she needed. Yes. And to be the guide and to be the parent that she needs to become the person that she will eventually become.
Yeah, because these kids who we talk about as being high needs, they're the world changers. Like these are the people that just don't sit idly by and let shit happen. Like they stand up and they say, no, that's not okay, and I'm not going to stand for it. Like these are the people who are going out there on a limb and doing amazing things in this world. Or they're the people who are so like shamed and defeated that they lose that amazing natural quality that they have. So I think when you have one of these kinds of kids, I know that's like a nice, pretty reframe, but it really does give you this great opportunity to grow into the person that they need you to be.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, we spend a lot of time, the three of us, especially Ella and I, because now that we're a bi-state household, I do a decent amount of single parenting,
Yeah.
So there's a certain amount of figuring out what Ella's needs are at any given time and trying to fulfill those as best as I can, while also nurturing the qualities of, independence and autonomy and, just being nurturing.
I love the creativity that has gone into the way that your life is set up right now. I think a lot of families, when they come to me, they feel stuck and like everything is immovable in their life, and there's no way that that it could possibly be any different. And so I am often inviting people to get so tremendously creative in their lives, because there's so much more room for everyone's needs and for everyone's values to be expressed than people realize. So I love the creativity that you guys have brought to the table in designing your life together.
Yeah, I think that part of that, feeling that, the life has to be the way that it is, or just feeling very confined by the way your life is, results from our thought that, or need for certainty, right? Mm-hmm. And you feel constrained by it, but also it's terrifying to think of changing it.
Yeah.
Because not going with this constraining set of things is also like opening up the box and thinking, okay, so if I can actually create something different, what does that look like? And what are the steps that I actually have to take? And that's the key piece, is actually take those steps.
Yeah.
And that's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, it is. Let's just try it. That's like a phrase that I say a lot. Like,
totally.
Let's just try it. What would it be like for you if ... Like, and that's for everything. That's for like big lifestyle design issues. And it's also for like those parenting moments. Like, what would it be like for you if, when they expressed their uncomfortable feelings, you did nothing but reflect and validate them? You didn't try to teach them anything. You didn't try to give consequences for anything. Just when they expressed things that made you feel uncomfortable, if you did nothing but reflect them back, that's it. What would that be like for you? And then let's just try it. Let's just try it. You're not committed to it forever. Let's just try it and see what happens. Like, I think those are those little like using language in that way can help people to get a little bit braver.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it doesn't have to be forever.
No, it doesn't. And I think that that's something, maybe it's one of my superpowers with Josh, is like we collectively realize that nothing is forever. Unless you, and even if you want it to be forever, like, hate to break it to you, it's not forever. Like, he has this, I don't know if it's his phrase, but he says it every now and then, like, on a long enough timeline, like, everything is ephemeral.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and so we can always change it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
always.
Inviting in a little bit more playfulness can be a really good part of, I have found it to be an essential component to adaptability. So you've talked about like being able to adapt, especially in like negotiating, collaborating your partner's values and needs and your values and needs. I think if we can bring some playfulness in, that helps with the adaptability. For example, like, I don't think it's been 2 years, maybe a year and a half ago, we were living in San Diego, where I was born and where we'd been living for the last decade. And I experienced a pregnancy loss, and I told my husband, who's also named Josh, I was like, babe, I want to leave. Like, I don't want to live here. Not only do I not want to live in this house, I want to move to like a totally different part of the country. I want to have like a whole new adventure. I want to completely change our lives. We'd never owned a house before. Like, we'd always rented. I was like, I want to buy a house, and I want it to be like a falling down fixer-upper, and I want us to like... I wanted to like completely flip our lives upside down. And there have been times when he's, wanted to do that. And so then it's a conversation, but you have to have like some playfulness to get brave enough to do it. But a conversation where he's saying, okay, like how can I get my needs met in this new picture, that like you're wanting to paint for us? And just being playfully brave. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? That helps you to be brave. Like, worst case scenario, we can always come back. Like, okay, we don't like it, we can come back. Okay, worst case scenario, sort of like walking those through and making a plan for those things. I have found to be really helpful for us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That sounds a lot like the decision sort of process that I made with leaving my former employment and starting Minimal Wellness. Was like, what's the worst that could happen?
Exactly. Exactly. You can always go back and apply for more industry related jobs. And
they actually offered me my job back a year into it. It's just like, but convincing, it was hard enough to convince myself, although there was enough like dissatisfaction to where it was not actually that hard.
Discomfort in the form of motivation.
Right, exactly. But in terms of, talking about it with especially my parents, who leaving a job that paid well and that they perceived to be, very stable was crazy, especially on the heels of a divorce. But it was almost a year and a half later, and I was like, no, I can do this. And worst case scenario, 6 months in, it's going nowhere, or a year in, it's going nowhere. I get a job somewhere else.
Yes,
like, it's
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love that. Isn't it funny too how oftentimes our extended circle of connection it's unintentional, but they can what's the right language to say this without being negative or rude, that like their values can weigh on us, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because our choices reflect on their story, because we're characters in their story. So our choices affect their story, and therefore they are invested. And sometimes it can be challenging to navigate being in connection with someone who you love when you feel that pressure very strongly. Yeah.
That perfectly encapsulated my experience. I love them to pieces, and they're amazing, wonderful people. But it was a really challenging couple of years in our relationship, because I felt like I was failing them to a certain extent. As the newly divorced and soon to be, unemployed in one level of the word. 30-something mom, single mom. It's like, what? Yeah. I'm sorry, Mom and Dad.
Yeah, because if you live up to their values of like being married and having a kid and having, you went to school and you have this job, that, just you're a character in their story, so that it, through their value lens, that reflects positively on them. And of course, it doesn't happen on a conscious level. They're not thinking, I want to look better to my friend, so I want her to stay in an unhappy marriage. It all happens on like this unconscious level, and they experience it as concern, like they're concerned because you're falling outside of their definition of success and what they believe is the formula for happiness. Yeah.
And it did take a lot of conversations of like, I was unhappy. Like, we had many conversations about the level of unhappiness. And so something had to change. It's just like, they were definitely uncomfortable, more uncomfortable than I was with the level of sort of perceived risk that I was willing to take to change my situation and to change my state and ultimately to change my happiness, right?
Yeah.
Like, just 3 years later, I couldn't imagine being happier. And I don't mean that I can't be happier.
Right.
But like, I am content and happy, and it's not because my life is without challenge.
Yeah.
But it's a set of challenges that I have very, very intentionally chosen.
Your choices are in alignment with your values, and that leads to your version of happiness.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, so let's talk about those priorities. With the foundation laid, we can then shift our attention to the expression of our values, which I use the word priorities for, which is like the framework, like you talked about, those core values kind of being your framework. So priorities for me are where we choose to focus our attention and energy and resources. And some of them tend to change seasonally. For example, home renovation in our fixer-upper was a top priority for a few seasons as we moved into this house as a family and needed things like electricity and hot water and heat and floors without holes and walls. And that's now shifted as we feel safe and comfortable in this sweet home we created for our family. So again, many people are living off of inherited and societal priorities. Show me your bank account and calendar and I'll show you your priorities. That's like one of like the quickest, easiest ways to get at this issue. And we want to move away from blindly following those mainstream priorities like busy and more and control into living with intention. So what are your, and I'm asking like I want my listeners to think about this, what are your top 5 priorities? And I wrote out mine in the Sage Homeschooling book, but one of them is creative work and service, which is this podcast. That's my version of like contribution and creativity. So Bex, what are some of your priorities in this season?
Yeah, so definitely, growth and creation in this coming season. So I feel like I'm on the cusp of seasons, right? And
ooh, I'm excited.
Yeah, it's super exciting. So for the last like 6-9 months, I've kind of kept my work life, my contribution. That's how I express my value for contribution and creation, is through my work. And so that I feel like is going to ramp up more. So that's writing blog posts, it's creating recipes, it's doing client work, etc. But then also the contribution piece is I express that with contribution to my extended family, and also to my immediate family. So that'd be Josh and Ella. Whether that's creating meals for them or prioritizing time. What I've noticed is that the contribution piece to them is really important to me. So it's contribution both to the broader society and also people who engage with my work, but more closely, more intimately to my immediate family. So that part is going to be more focused on in this coming season. And less, like you were saying, getting your house safe, right? Just safe and habitable, right? I feel like I did that to a certain extent. Was like I established a home in Los Angeles, and I feel comfortable in our new place in Montana, and like that took a while. Yeah. Especially like coming back and forth between them so frequently, and getting used to that fluidity. Yeah, that rhythm. And so also health is going to be taking a new sort of front seat. And with that, it's more the physicality side of things. So with all that movement, with all that time focused in other areas, a priority in this coming season is going to be sort of getting the way that I've sort of come to think of it is getting my athleticism back.
You're going to get swole.
Not really, but yeah, I suppose. No, it's so funny. I just want to feel fit, like truly fit again, right? Like I'm at this place health-wise where like I'm in a good place, right? Like I eat well, and that's an easy thing for me to prioritize and maintain. And I do a reasonably good job of getting like baseline needs of, movement down. But I grew up an athlete, and it's a big part of my identity, and it's kind of been on the shelf for a while. And so I really want that back, right? Like I want to be able to go play a soccer game if I wanted to and not injure myself or,
Right.
just be so sore I can't function for the next week.
Yeah.
Or I want to be able to, come this coming ski season, like I want to ski and I want to go backcountry skiing and do these things that require a certain baseline of physical fitness that I currently don't have. So
You want to be able to jump into that dodgeball ring and walk away feeling like a boss.
oh my God, you read my mind. John signed us up for a dodgeball league.
I heard him say that in one of the. So her partner is one of the minimalists. So I listened to his podcast. I think I heard him say that in one of the YouTube videos.
I don't know what got into him, but he signed us up for a dodgeball league.
That's awesome.
So there's that. Ironically, the dodgeball had no bearing on my decision to sort of.
Sure, likely story.
Oh, my hand-eye coordination is a disaster. Never going anywhere. I'm going to be a giant liability on this team.
I gotta be honest, I feel like I have more fun when I'm terrible at something, especially in terms of athletics. Like if I'm bad at it, I feel like I have so much more fun because like I don't take it as seriously, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
I will be the weak link and I will happily embody that play.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have our values sort of as the foundation, and then we have our priorities, which is, I mean, really a lot of it boils down to like, what are you spending your time and your money on? Like you talked about, like with nutrition, are you spending your money and your time like buying healthy ingredients and cooking really good foods? Or are you going through the drive-thru?
Yeah.
So like priorities can help you in sharpening your values. And then for me, the next level is intentions. So under each of my top 5 priorities, I then branch out with 5 intentions. Some people set goals, but goals are really outcome oriented and we can't always control the outcomes. So I prefer intentions as I can fully control where and how I apply my efforts. For example, my personal growth priority, which includes self-care and self-driven learning, one of my intentions last season was my minimalist wardrobe, and that ended up turning into the minimalist wardrobe for Earth Mama's class that I have. But what that looks like, is different for each priority and each value and each season and all that goodness. So what benefits have you experienced or witnessed from setting intentions?
You said the most brilliant thing about goals being outcome centric, right? They're focused on getting this outcome. I generally think I don't set in my word for intentions is more like standards, right?
I like
and
it.
So, yeah, and this actually is something that Josh and I have kind of talked a lot about over the last couple of years is like raising your standards. So like raising the things that you're willing to do or you're going to do on a daily or weekly or monthly basis. So they're sort of refined versions of priorities. What are you actually going to do?
Yes, exactly.
What are the actions you're going to take? And then lowering your expectations. So that gets to the outcomes piece, right? Like instead of thinking that you're going to do these intentions, like you're setting these intentions with a specific outcome in mind, or you're making these standards with a specific expectation in mind. You try to let go of the outcome or the expectation and purely focus on raising your standards or improving your intentions.
Yes.
And I think that's a really helpful framework for me as well. So I love hearing that you do that as well.
Oh, so much, yes. Well, and like under that personal growth priority, one of the things I have right now is that I read nonfiction every morning. Like, so it's part of like my morning rhythm, my morning routine is that when I first wake up, I like we have like morning cuddle time and I read nonfiction, like while my kids are cuddling and waking up. And that is like, I don't have the goal of reading like 5 nonfiction books a month. Like especially as a mom, I feel like because my priorities and my values are so in order, I know that like if there's a connection need that trumps books, like, so I really have found so much more success, as I define it, in setting intentions over setting goals, especially in a lot of the self-help world and specifically the entrepreneurial world. There's so much of like, you need to define how many followers you want to have or how many, and I just have not had success with that approach at all. I've had success in, like you talked about, raising my standards or setting my intentions based on my values, building out those priorities, and then actually mapping out through intentions what I'm going to do to align, what am I actually going to do to align my efforts with my priorities and my values.
Yeah. Beautiful. So like a standard that I'm working on re-implementing, so I had it for a while, it kind of fell off the radar, and I'm bringing it back, is the habit of daily writing, and getting back to doing daily writing. I'm also setting a standard while Ella and I are in Montana of doing something fun outside, either before school or usually after school. So she goes to a Montessori preschool here in town. And so one of the things that she really thrives on is being outside and getting in lots of movement. She's a high energy kid.
Yes, you have to listen to, I think it was episode 11 that just came out of my podcast on nature with Nicolette Souter of Wilder Child.
Yes.
You would love it.
Yes, I saw that actually, and I totally made a note. I've got it downloaded actually. So it's a big value of mine as well, is time in nature. And because her values, I think, aren't quite as well defined yet. Right. The fact that I know she needs time outside and to run around and to feel the natural world. I need to help both of us really make sure that happens. So
absolutely. Have you read the book Barefoot and Balanced?
No, I haven't.
So I'm like halfway through it, and there's stuff I love and stuff I don't love. But as someone who works in wellness, I recommend that you read that. You might like it. It really dives into like the physiological things that underlie a lot of our need, especially with kids, but with all humans, to be outdoors and in connection with nature. I think you'd like it. It really takes like a wellness lens.
Yeah, I will. I'm writing that down right now. Thank
Balanced
you.
and barefoot.
Yeah, nice. So yeah, other standards. I'm working on some around more regular cooking, both more in California than in Montana. I do a pretty good job of cooking at home with Ella and I. Josh has a different set of dietary needs than I do. I can kind of eat whatever that's reasonably healthy and get away with it.
Yeah.
And he has intolerances and sensitivities and stuff. And so, cooking for the two of us is just a little more limiting and a little bit more challenging.
Yeah.
And he has a habit. He doesn't cook. And so he eats a lot of his meals out. And so when I come to California, it's really easy for me to just like fall into that habit.
Yeah, hop on his bandwagon.
Totally. And we eat well when we eat out. It's not like we're eating junk. But like, it's just, I have to be more intentional or, have a better set of standards around like, hey, we're going to have, a few meals, dinners specifically, but also brunches. We tend to eat 2 meals and a snack.
Yeah.
I have to be more aware of my standards around that.
Yeah, for sure. That's a challenge for us. So we have like a value of, obviously wellness and being healthy and all of that. And so one of our priorities was nutrition. And one of the intentions I set was to figure out like a recipe for a super healthy morning smoothie and to make a morning smoothie as part of my morning routine every day. And so I've been doing it for a couple of years, and it's been a total game changer for us. It's just this supercharged, healthy smoothie that I give to all the kids. Like, we all drink it in the morning. And then that really sets the tone for the whole day. Like, I found that makes such a huge difference. And then cooking, my husband and I both suck at cooking, and I've recently surrendered to the fact that I cannot eat eggs, and so I'm presently like trying to figure out what that leaves and what I can eat. So we're working on that right now too. I get it.
Yeah. I love the smoothie idea in the morning, like especially for the kids, because smoothies are something that I do myself. And that Josh does, that we do get together when we're in California. But so far I haven't found one that Ella really loves that I feel good about giving her.
Yeah.
So
I feel super good about ours. And our approach to food is really different from a lot of mainstream families in that we stock the kitchen with like healthy, prepped and portioned foods that my kids can help themselves to and prepare independently all day long. And then we have like a big family dinner. So basically I make a morning smoothie, and then we make together and serve this. It's typically kind of deconstructed, but a dinner meal. And in the meantime, like, my kids really use their like self-driven learning, because they want to. They eat when they're hungry, and they prepare the kinds of foods that their body is craving. And I trust that like there are reasons behind all that, and it's sort of my role to cultivate the environment. And so in the kitchen, that means like I try to cultivate a healthy kitchen. But with that morning smoothie, it really releases a lot of the pressure that I don't have to feel pressure to like micromanage every nutrient that goes into their mouths. Like, they have a nice foundation.
That's such a great strategy. And it's actually totally appropriate, right? Like, it's the role of the parent to, in terms of health and wellness, to provide the nourishing environment, the nourishing foods, but that provide can mean very different things to different people, right? Yes. And, as your children get older, and I'm doing this with Ella, like, explain to them, kind of like, here's what our bodies need. And, what is your body feeling like it's telling you it needs right now? And
yes, strengthening that brain-body connection is a massive advantage. And someone who, I'm sure you are so well versed on the research around like eating disorders and obesity, and that like the surefire recipe for creating an eating disorder and for fostering obesity in children is hyper control around food and around meal times.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So giving them a lot of autonomy in terms of deciding when they're done with things and what they're going to eat within reason, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's good, especially for younger kids, to provide some encouragement and like some standards around, we do try one little bite of the things that are on our plates, but if it's not your preference, it's okay.
And role modeling is so powerful for that.
Right.
Like, when I try new foods, I'm trying them in connection with them, and they're seeing that, and I'm talking about it out loud. Like, the last time I tried peppers, I really didn't like them, but it's been a while, so I'm going to give them a try. Will you hold my hand? Okay, I'll take like 3 bites, and I'll give it a really good chance. And and it's totally sincere, like, as I move through these things. And then, so of course that's normal to them, and they try things again on a regular basis, because that's what we do.
Absolutely. I had that experience on the last flight I took with Ella. I got just a can of like the Bloody Mary mix, right? Like the spicy tomato juice. And she's like, what is that? Sees it in my glass. I'm like, it's spicy tomato juice. And she's like, ew. And I'm like, I don't know. I bet you would like it. It tastes kind of like slightly spicy and slightly watery pasta sauce. Like, I wasn't selling it very well, but she's like, can I try it? I'm like, sure. So we have this thing where she like dips her finger in my stuff, like all of my things, my beverages or my soups or whatever. And so her way of like just trying it a little bit is like, can I do a finger dip? So she does a finger dip, and she did that and tries it. And she's like, that's really good.
Oh, yay. And isn't that just what we were talking about too, with the difference between setting an intention and goal setting? Like, my goal is not for my kid to eat this amount of this food. Like, my intention is to expose them to a wide variety of nutrient rich foods, and like dipping the finger in that, like, that's totally the intention. And you're not pressuring her and putting a bunch of shame on her that she needs to drink half a can of it. Like, it's just try it, and it's okay if you don't like it. And having that lightness to it makes them a lot braver and a lot more willing to experiment and try new foods.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's move into our Q&A. I love that we went on like a food tangent. Can I just say one more thing about food, just because I get asked this all the time? I'm just going to hop in and add this one more thing. One of like the most successful tips that I give families is to not talk about food at meal times. Like, when you're sitting around the table, you can talk about anything in the world except food. And that like instantly removes all of this pressure, especially with picky eaters, that they're feeling around foods. You provide a little bit of something that you know they'll eat, and then some other things that they may not love, and then don't talk about the food. And that is a game changer. It changes the whole interaction. It removes that dynamic of control from the mealtime.
That's a great strategy. To be honest, I've never heard it put that way before, but yeah, the removing of like the perceived control sort of dynamic is really important.
Yeah, if you can extricate yourself from between your kid and their food, like just make the food, let it be about them and the food. Like that, it's them and it's their body and it's their food. Your job is to provide that healthy food. For picky eaters especially, yeah, you have like that one thing they're familiar with and then some other things they're not. And you can hold the boundary. Like, if they get upset, you can say, yeah, this is what we're having for dinner tonight. You're not hungry now. You don't have to eat it. If you get hungry later, it'll be here for you. But that's it. Then you don't talk about the food. Talk about the weather. Bring a joke book, like whatever. That's how you get yourself and those control issues out of the middle of that equation.
That's beautiful. I also think that people are so concerned about picky eaters and like the immediate result of like resolving the picky eating versus the long-term objective
relationship with food.
Right, of like cultivating a healthy relationship with food.
Yes.
And you don't want to shortchange yourself to try to quote unquote fix your picky eater by creating this long-term really challenged
absolutely
relationship with food.
Cutting off your nose to spite your face by like force feeding them something that they hate, and thus making them feel like physically violated and completely powerless, and then they'll hate whatever that is forever.
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree.
Right, now our Q&A. I love that we just went on like a whole little segment about food, so you guys get some bonus. So I posted in my Sage Parenting Tribe on Facebook that we were going to chat about priorities today, and asked, what challenges have you faced in writing out your values and priorities? Leia asked, my challenge is that sometimes my values feel conflicted to me, like they can't all live together at once. I'm working on getting them to talk to each other and come into agreement. So what do you have to say to that, Bex?
So that, oh gosh, that's life, right? Like, I honestly think that, when we're younger, especially like teenagers and, early 20-somethings, we're not so good with this concept of holding on to and living with the fact that we sometimes have opposing needs.
Yeah.
In life, whether they're values or whether they're opposing demands on our time or like opposing relationships. Like, part of the art of like living life like seems to be the ability to develop like being able to hold on to two opposed values or beliefs and recognize the validity in both of them. Yes. Right? And like that we are a combination of all of these very sometimes opposing viewpoints and opposing beliefs, and we're complex creatures. And that's okay. Like sometimes, for example, if you're talking about like the generally opposing needs or values of certainty and variety, like a lot of times those could be viewed as being in conflict with each other. But almost all of us have some need for certainty and some need for variety.
Yeah.
And so I think the dance becomes, how do you fulfill your need for certainty, your value around certainty, and how do you fulfill your value around variety? And to me, it seems like what you got to just avoid doing is directly doing something that makes the other thing, like negates the other thing.
Right.
Right. And so there are just innumerable ways that we can fulfill a lot of our values, and just trying to find the ways of fulfilling those values that don't, to the extent possible, directly negatively impact the other ones. But sometimes it's not possible, right? So like I'm an extreme introvert. Josh is an even more extreme introvert. And yet we want to spend time together. And so, actually this is a good example, because this week I normally would be in Los Angeles because Ella is with her biological father. And this week I said, I can't come back this week. Like I need a week of solitude to focus on a few of my other needs. And so sometimes it's saying, yes, this means that my FaceTime or my quality time with Josh will be diminished this week, but it builds up my bucket in terms of my value around solitude and my need for solitude. And what I've recognized is that when I don't get some of these needs met, and they don't have to be met all the time, right? Like I don't live in perpetual solitude.
Yeah.
But yep, I need it every now and then. And so for me, that's come to be like every 6 months or so, like I have several days where I'm by myself. And I can get that other way, or I could get that other ways, but that's just the way that it's worked out best most recently with how my life is currently set up and structured.
I think that's such a great point about how they can all live together, and almost like it's almost like certain needs bubble up to the surface, and everybody kind of takes turns.
Yeah.
I think also cognitive dissonance is my favorite, because it is the prime opportunity for growth. So you may have outgrown something and need to make an adjustment, and that's okay. That's good. Even if you feel your values conflicting, especially with some new experience or understanding, that is often an invitation to dive back in and reevaluate them. Lay everything back out on the table and see how that new piece fits and how the whole picture fits together anew, and then overlay those priorities, because aligning your values and your priorities is really where the magic happens. The ordered list of priorities helps me to clear up conflicts a lot of the time. But like you mentioned, sometimes it's not about one being a higher priority than the other. It's just about holding space for more than one. The season of transition into parenthood, like we mentioned, is the time when you're engaging in this process the most. I know for me personally, all my shit was dumped out on the floor, and everything I thought I knew was in pieces. And it can feel scary, but this writing of who you are and the path you're going to walk, it's amazing. So I just want to encourage people to be bold and be brave and question everything and be the author of your story. And so if that looks like having, a week to yourself every, whatever you said, 6 months or once a season, write that into your story. You get to be the author of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now let's move into a day in the life, a perfect time for a sigh as we transition into this nostalgic portion of the episode. So part of why I do the day in the life segment on this podcast, where I invite my friends to describe their favorite day this week and why they loved it, is because I want to show you a picture of what it looks like when different families apply the same values that we hold here on this podcast. And you see them right in the subtitle of the show, gentle parenting, so that would be the value, and the priorities would be things like love and connection and respect and empathy and kindness and authenticity. Natural homeschooling, which would be things like growth and freedom and creativity and nature. Simple living, things like time, peace, health, comfort, honesty, beauty, simplicity, and family adventure. So things like adventure, humanism, laughter, strength, experiences. So it's just really a way to show people how it can look different for different families to live out those same values. So describe for us your favorite day this week and share with us why you loved it.
Yeah. So this past Sunday, I was in California with one of my sisters. She was visiting California for the first time. She's my first family member to visit.
Aww,
Yeah, and Ella was there with Josh and I, and we had a relatively relaxing morning. We got up, we had coffee in the sunshine and on our balcony, and that's just my favorite way to start the day, is with coffee in the fresh air.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just beautiful. And then the four of us went to our favorite breakfast place in Los Angeles. It's called Squirrel. Yeah. And we all had like different meals, and they were all just perfect and fantastic. And then we came back to our house, and we walked down and participated in the gay pride parade.
Oh, yay! I saw your stuff on Instagram.
Yeah. LGBTQA, right?
Yeah, something like
yeah.
that. It changes all the time. Even I can't keep up.
Yeah. But they call it, Pride, LA Pride. So it's the Pride weekend. It was the Pride parade. And so the four of us were down there, and then we met up with Joshua's business partner, Ryan, and his life partner, Mariah. All the partners get a little confusing sometimes. Seems very clear to us, but explaining it is...
I get it. I can follow along.
Totally. So, we had this little group together, and we, just celebrated love. And I just love it. It was wonderful.
Oh,
right?
I love that.
To be able to have that experience with Ella, to show her something that she would not have seen here in Montana, as really important to me. That sort of cultural diversity piece is lacking here, or at least the celebration of it as a valid and legitimate part of the world. So that was really special. And then Josh took off. He went to get some work done at the office, and my sister Libby and Ella and I hung out, just the three of us, at the parade for a while longer. We were dancing and throwing confetti and all this great stuff. And then we went back and had a swim in the pool at the building we live in. So just got to have some, fun, relaxing summertime. And then we drove Libby to the airport. And after that, Ella, Josh, and I had a really nice dinner, just the three of us. And Josh and I spent the evening connecting after the weekend family time. So it was just this really great weekend where, or great day, I should say, where a bunch of different values that don't often get fulfilled really got face time.
Yeah. I heard relationships, the connection piece, nurturing all those relationships. I heard diversity and experiences and being outdoors and good food. I mean, all these different values, like all weaving so harmoniously that day.
Yeah, it was just wonderful. So.
Oh, I love that. Now it's my turn to sigh.
Exactly.
So let's take our deep dive. What are your favorite resources for people to dive deeper into this topic?
Yeah, so I've got a few good ones. One of the best books that I've read in the last 5 years is a book called How to Be Here.
Ooh, I've not heard of that.
Written by Rob Bell. It was a book that I read right around the time that I made the decision to leave my former work here in Montana and start Minimal Wellness. So it was really pivotal for me to like help make that decision.
Oh, wow.
And part of that was it does a good job of kind of explaining how to assess and then have the strength and courage to rebuild your life if you need to rebuild your life. And it was just a really good book for me to read at that exact moment because I felt like I'd gone through a sort of Phoenix experience with my whole divorce, not that far in the past at the time, and I was like, I don't know that I'm necessarily ready to do another version of that, and that book really helped me make the decision to go forward.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really good.
Did you like fangirl out when you because Josh interviewed him for the podcast, right? So surely you've met him.
Yeah, I have met him. I'm not prone to fangirling.
It doesn't seem like that is really a quality that would be within your nature, but I just had to ask.
He's an amazing human, and so there's a lot of respect and interest and curiosity, definitely. But yeah,
that's like the introvert version of fangirling.
It's totally yeah, absolutely. So there was some introverted fangirling for sure. But so Josh and Ryan wrote a great book on values. It doesn't sound like it's about values, nor does it sound like How to Be Here is about values, but minimalism, it's the subtitles Live a Meaningful Life. That book, they talk a lot about what their values are and sort of how to integrate them into your life. So that one was helpful to me as well.
Well, yeah, minimalism is all about values. I mean, really, that's the meat of it.
Yeah, it really is. But the book's a short, concise read, so it's a decent place for people to start. I've got a website or a blog post, I should say, about values, and it's got a worksheet that people can use as a starting place for this.
I've not seen that.
Work if they want. So it's at minimalwellness.com/values.
And I'll link to all this in the show notes too.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. So there's a worksheet and a blog post associated with it if you want to kind of start putting some words onto paper.
Awesome.
That's pretty helpful. And
you have different programs program. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so the 23-day priorities reset is a program that I developed a little over a year ago. That's actually designed to help people walk through figuring out some of their values. I think that the process of identifying your values, especially if you've gone 30 or 40 or 50 years without really contemplating it, it can be a time-consuming, laborious process. And so the 23-day reset is designed to just either fine-tune that for people who have spent time with it, or get the ball rolling on helping people figure out what actually is important in their lives and adjust their priorities accordingly, so that we're spending more time fulfilling the values that will actually lead to a healthier, happier, more fulfilling life. and that we can start letting go of the values and, more importantly, the perceived priorities or how we've been spending our time in ways that don't fulfill our actual values.
Right.
And so I do that through, obviously, the lens of health and wellness, and it's a wellness-focused program, meaning that we talk about food and nutrition and sleep and exercise, but it all kind of comes back to this concept of your values really being the foundation of your life. And if you're not fulfilling those values, you're going to feel unhappy and discontented. And a lot of times people fall victim to like the quick fix or consumerism or, any sort of consumption and acquisition type patterns as a solution to that discomfort, when the solution really is getting better at aligning your actions and making your priorities fulfill your values.
Yeah. Like the solution is not like more money or more stuff or more people or more. The solution is to go back to the other side and get clear on your values and then align your actions and your choices with those values.
Right, exactly. And also, like, the solution isn't a 23-day diet that's going to make you lose 20 pounds and you're going to be, all lean and shredded and guess
Eat
what?
Nothing but grapes for 5 days.
Right. And by the way, you'll still be unhappy. So helping to kind of debunk this mythology around some of these sort of quick fix concepts.
Oh, and I love that. It's holistic.
Yeah, it very much is.
Oh, I love that. Okay, we will definitely include a link to that. And the only resource I'm going to recommend besides you, which I wholeheartedly recommend, is a book called Emotional Agility. So Dr. Cassidy Freitas, who was on one of our earlier episodes talking about therapy, she is a friend of mine and she actually recommended this book. It's called Emotional Agility, Get Unstuck, Embrace Change, and Thrive in Work and Life. It's by Susan David, and it is a fantastic book. I'm a really big fan of hers, and it was really, really, really good. And so if you're trying to dive deeper into the issue of values, I highly recommend it.
I love that. I've actually stumbled upon that book in other recommendations. Like, the name just is really, it draws my curiosity. So I might have to pick that up.
You would love it. And I read the ebook, but she has this amazing South African accent, and I'm told the audiobook is just phenomenal because she narrates it, and it's just delicious, I'm told. So if you have the option of ebook or audiobook, the people have told me the audiobook is the way to go. But yeah, it's a really good book. You would totally like it. It's definitely your jam.
I will check it out for sure.
And let's embrace nepotism and recommend the Minimalist Podcast, which is one of my absolute all-time favorites. If you want the show notes sent right to your inbox, just subscribe over on sageparenting.com and you won't miss out on all the Sage family goodness. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and for letting me be a part of your alone time week in Montana.
Thank you for having me. This has been a delight.